Acceptable to be third world when your name has been extracted from your tongue and its gravitas unearthed from your mind. With fragments in our hands, attempted recreating beauties lost to the sleeping moon, Africa. You are the essence of innovation and origin of civilization. How have you forgotten the root of all life? The first human words were spoken by you. You cradled mathematics, rocked navigation, pressed paper from papyrus reed, burped pyramids. Were visionaries before we were accredited, so we exhaled the future. Exponential innovation and thinking for you was not a program incubated in a hub. It was your communal daily bread, imagination, the language with which we spoke to each other. Fear irrelevance brewed by old knowledge. Fall in love with the future you have not kissed. Set your own table before the world. Deck it with your own systems. Feast on your force to drape descendants with a power. Not all that is foreign is greater than your own. Hone your force. Own your ish.
Good morning to everybody who has joined us for today's session, titled the Lekgotla, which is our facilitated public discussions and engagements on the Gauteng Township Economic Development Draft Bill. I'd firstly just like to introduce myself. My name is Nomfundo Faith Dlamini. I am the Program Manager for Productive Cities at the South African Cities Network. And I'd just like to acknowledge everyone who has joined us for our session today. Welcome to our Urban Festival, and a special welcome to the Lekgotla, which, as you know, is quite a point of high debate and contention. But I do want to acknowledge everybody who has joined in today. You are here because you are a nation builder and you care about fostering inclusivity, economic empowerment, emancipation, and the uplifting of livelihoods of not some, but all communities, specifically those residing in less privileged environments, which we call our townships and EGASI environments. So thank you so much for joining us today. Your respectful opinion and diverse perspectives are well acknowledged and welcomed on this particular webinar today. So before I outline the purpose of today's meeting, I'd just like to introduce some of the panelists that we'll be having today. If the panelists can also please just put on their screen cameras when they are speaking, so that people are also just familiar with your face, that they can attest the name to their face, especially during this particular conversation. So our first panel member will be Mr. Matobane Masha, who's from the Gauteng Department of Economic Development. Soon we'll also be joined by Mr. Mpumelelo Madigana from the Gauteng Department of Economic Development as well. We also are joined by the team from Mjaji Research and Development, and we'll have Sandra, who will be giving us a brief synopsis pertaining to the public participation process. So without further ado, I just want to thank you all for being available to take us through some of the points that will be pertaining to the policy commitments as well as the provisions of the draft bill and the importance that it resonates, especially for municipalities, business owners, investors, and the communities at large. And so, colleagues, as we are going to carry on with today's session, I just wanted to outline the purpose of today's session for everybody who's here, so that we're all quite clear about our particular objectives and our deliverables. So firstly, the session is a stakeholder engagement session. So we're wanting to solicit some technical and legal inputs from you as participants to also enrich and enhance the draft Township Economic Development Bill. The session will also aim to outline the value proposition that the eventual act will have on local government and for all stakeholders in township enterprises, and that the session also aims to serve as an educational platform. And I think this is possibly the main objective of this particular discussion, to ensure that we engage the civic pertaining to this draft piece of legislation, and to also inform our stakeholders, the interest groups, and the individuals concerned about what it is that the draft bill is proposing, and how it is that during this particular public consultation process, you can also endeavor in interacting and providing your particular perspective and opinion to also sharpen the kind of legislation that we are wanting it to emanate into. So for the colleagues who might not have gone through the documentation that is shared upon RSVPing for this event, please do pay attention to our chat box. We will provide a link with those documentations, which is the supporting documentation of this particular draft bill. So what will be attached there will be the actual draft bill, which will require your commentary. It has also gone out for gazetting, so you are also able to access it on national platforms, but for the interest of accessibility, we will also provide it through the link. There's a list of economic sectors, and these are an attachment to the draft bill that provide for a list of economic sectors that need to be considered in relation to the bill. Then there's also an explanatory memorandum, or memorandum of objects, on the Township Economic Development Bill. And this is a document which provides a summary of all key chapters and sections of the bill to enhance your understanding of the intentions of the bill. And then we also have attached the Township Economic Development Policy for the Gauteng City region. This is a supplementary contextual and background information that is provided in respect to the development of the bill. So a lot of the clauses and the sentiments of the bill will be better also outlined and explained through this particular development policy. And then lastly, we also will attach in these supplementary documents the stakeholder commenting template. And this will be the template that you'll need to submit your comments and your feedback on, especially for the interest of the stakeholder engagement team. So please do feel free to engage with the panelists and to seek clarity, and especially ask questions. For those colleagues who might not have gone through the materials yet, please don't feel like you're excluded. For those colleagues who have, please do also pose your particular opinions, suggestions, or clarity-seeking questions more than anything, so that we're able to have a very enriched discussion and be able to also delineate any of the misconceptions or areas of clarity or confusion. So without further ado, I just wanted to kindly introduce, or reintroduce rather, Mr. Matopane Masha. And Mr. Masha, I'd like to ask you if you can please possibly just start by outlining for the individuals who are part and parcel of this conversation, what exactly the bill aims to do.
Good morning once again. As mentioned, my name is Matopane Masha from Gauteng Department of Economic Development. So in the main, really, I think as you have outlined, that just to check back in terms of so Gauteng has introduced the bill to try and pretty much obviously streamline a lot of activities that are happening in a township as far as regulatory support is concerned. So I think most of the main object in terms of what the bill intends to do and so forth. Maybe let me just flag my presentation so that I can just already take the panel through, the meeting through what the objectives of the bill are and how we got to where we are at the moment. if that is acceptable.
Yes, definitely. I think please do. I'll just ask that after, as you're flighting your presentation, if you can just not go into the element of the clauses just as yet, just to solicit some element of discussion before we get to that section. So you can take it away. Thank you.
Can you all see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. So just as mentioned, what is important is that what exactly is the bill all about? So as indicated, I think in a lot of the documents that we've been sharing is that we have been implementing the Township Economy Program for the past 5 years as a province, and of course, part of the problems that we've picked up. In fact, one of the biggest problems in terms of impediments in terms of achieving some of our goals was sort of, at the convergence where a lot of these regulations, policies, and so forth converges, you then have a sort of almost a contradictory impact in terms of what we wanted to achieve. So the bill basically is more about taking steps to allow us, to nudge townships into areas that can become fully fledged commercial zones, both by streaming some of the rules and regulations and pretty much, working around determining where you can and how you can start a business in the township. So that is very important point to make. So, but also making it easier to open businesses, formalized business in the township. Obviously also through some of the sectors the proposed sectors, try and basically provide some sort of prioritization mechanism in terms of sectors that we can support, where we can pretty much incentivize development of township enterprises and so forth. So I suppose at a higher level, definitely that's what we aim to achieve. So as a result, we are going out soliciting inputs and technical inputs and general inputs in terms of the draft provisions of the bill. Remember, the bill is still at the draft stage. So in the main, pretty much, I think the inputs should just get enhance where we need to enhance, and where we pretty much feel that we can refine some of the sections and enhance them. I think that will help us a lot. So in the main, I think that is what we are trying to achieve. So when you look at township in terms of what you call the lived experiences, so as a province, we've done a lot of work and research in the township, including what you call the township baseline study. So where we are basically trying to map out the township, who is in the township, who's doing what, and so forth. So part of the current problematization or problem statement around the gaps that we have in the townships were informed basically by that research that we conducted in terms of implementation. So pretty much in the main, and I think some of the discussions we've had recently captures this very well. So at the moment, for example, as things stand, the township infrastructure is not able, for example, to accommodate certain cohort of businesses. So when you achieve certain goals in terms of building a cohort of enterprises that can hire people, because the infrastructure is not supportive, that they move out of the township, and they go to your more like the periphery of your CBDs and so forth. And as a result, part of the issues that we are trying to address, like for example, enabling people to work and live and play where basically in the township, that becomes a moving goalpost. So I think that is very important. That so part of the interventions you'll see, I think, as we discussed the bill, is that there is also a proposal around how we can structure township infrastructure support so that we enable some of these activities. So otherwise, what we will then have is that once you are able to develop a certain cohort, they will move out. And this we experienced recently in Mamelodi, where we are assisting with the Tshwane special economic zone. That yes, when you want to localize some of the interventions, and the problem is that you may not find those. It's not that the township has not developed those skills, but those skills have moved out of the township. So what do you do? So you can't always start from scratch always. So I think that is a very important point that to make in terms of the problem statement in terms of some of the issues that we pick up in the township. and that in the main, at the convention where you have various pieces of legislation, policies, bylaws, and so forth converging, and you definitely have a problem there. I mean, even if you just take one example in terms of how the metros in the province advocates for the use of public space, that is totally different, you know, and as a result, it has an interesting effect in terms of how you support informal traders, for example, where you allow them to trade and how. So those are some of the things that we have picked up as serious impediments, especially in terms of if you're going to support businesses from at the level, the layer that we are targeting. So I'll just maybe jump into the objectives and then maybe pause a bit, Mfundo, because you said I shouldn't get into the clauses, and then we can then get into the clauses later. So pretty much, I suppose, in terms of the object of the bill, we basically want to provide a regulatory framework to make it possible for guys that are in the township to establish viable and thriving businesses. So the 90% of the informal economy in the township constitutes about 90%. So these are the guys that at the moment, as things stand, can access your formal support programs, be it access to funding through your banking channels, even some of the established government channels. So which becomes a problem, because if you've got that and you've got 70 to 80% of a population in the province living in that space, so you really have a recipe for a disaster if you don't necessarily manage that space properly. So that's one of the issues that we have. So we want to really provide a framework that helps us there. But also we want to designate business activities in the township areas that are reserved or limited for citizens or persons who have permanent residency in the Republic. And I think obviously I don't want to belabor this part. It is being debated everywhere, even though we don't think that the discussion is balanced, but I suppose we'll just leave it to this session to obviously also jump into it, because there is nowhere in the bill where we are advocating for the banning of foreign nationals or so forth. But we are talking about reserving and limiting, which is something that, I mean, when you follow the discussions in the media and even look at what other countries are doing, you realize that it is a standard practice across the world. But in our country, I suppose, the issue around the timing of introducing it is another matter. However, it's not it's something that in terms of your development objectives, a lot of countries have actually something similar in place, even much more stringent, even to the point of banning. So in this case, the point I just want to make is that we are not necessarily banning. So that is the part that I think needs to be emphasized. But also we want to promote the development and diversification of the economy, obviously, so that through regulation you can sort of diversify participation in certain sectors. Of course, using also public procurement as a strategic lever that we can use to kickstart certain activities, so that we're able to direct and redirect our investment as well, even as the public sector as well. But one of the issues that that is pretty much has been discussed a lot is about how the big retailers have sort of encroached into the township space in the past 5 years or so. So part of government investment, obviously, in the township infrastructure is that, for some odd reason, has obviously led to an investment of different kind, which may, in the process of doing that, has also displaced, especially your township retail space. So part of the work is that we need to be able to, the framework should be able to encourage a situation where there is direct, partnerships between these guys and the local guys as well, in terms of what they source and where they source. There was a time when we had a meeting with one of the big retailers in the township, and we were like saying, well, let's take a tour of your first. Would we be able to tell that this facility or this retail store is in a township in terms of what you sell? And I think in terms of the product and where the product comes from. And that means, therefore, in terms of really you developing, you're not necessarily rooted in this space. Most of these guys will just spend their CSI money buying blankets and so forth. But in terms of really investing in stimulating productive activities in the township, that is very muted. I know to a certain extent, in instances where you find SPA tends to do a bit of that, but not much. But if you look at other retailers is quite muted. But also, secondly, most of these guys, where they are anchor tenants in the township, they will have what you call exclusionary agreements with the property developers. So, for example, these guys will say that if I'm selling meat in this store, nobody else is around to sell the same products that I'm selling in the same mall or so forth. And as a result, it obviously already begins to, just even in terms of accessing the facility, and it was in some instances where, for example, you may find one or two local guys who want to use them, who want to also be placed in the mall. That may not be possible. So that is a problem. In fact, as a province, we even went to the Competition Commission around this thing. So part of the provisions of the bill are also informed by the recommendations of the Competition Commission with regards to the grocery market inquiry. So I think that is a very important point to make. But also, I suppose, I think I've already mentioned a bit in terms of establishing procurement rules. Are you guys getting a noise feedback in the background?
Just a little bit, but we can still hear you. Maybe, okay. Masha, if we can just try develop the conversation a little bit more. And I think you're hitting on some very interesting points. Okay. There's something that is of a notion to say that this notion of township economic development is not new. So the Gauteng province is known for having developed the Township Economic Revitalization Action Plan. And that was back in 2014 when this was introduced. Maybe just for the interest, before we carry on with the objectives of the bill, as we know that there are quite a few stipulations in terms of what it premises to do, can you maybe just unravel and unpack for the interest of our viewers today and our members who have joined in on the webinar, what is the stark difference between that Township Economic Revitalization Action Plan, which was established in 2014, and then what exactly this draft bill intends to achieve?
Okay, thanks for the question. I think, so just put it this way, what we've always had is that after the strategy was approved, the Township Economic Revitalization Strategy, we developed sort of key action plans in terms of the 8 areas that we identified as critical. So the Township Economy Action Plan is fairly recent, by the way. So that is part of the attempt to actually implement the township economy in the context of growing Gauteng together. So it contains quite high-level programs which we believe are game changers in certain areas in terms of the township. So it also has specific sector focus in terms of interventions. So what you will find when you look at the action plan is that it basically is there are programs in terms of, so what are we focusing on? It outlines that very well in terms of the township and what are the key deliverables for the next 5 years. So we'll capture that, for example, we'll have provisions around the township economy. So when you see an emphasis in the bill around how we must unlock the township economy, it's also informed by that as well. Township economy, I mean, the taxi industry, in a sense that if you look at how the industry is pretty much also the mainstay of the township economy. But also what we are saying is that with regard to that, we want to position taxi ranks, for example, as business and development nodes, as an example. So that it's not just a transit node where people come and go. So that we can actually develop it further, especially in areas where, for example, there might be provisions for additional retail facilities and so forth. But also begin to also link the key main players in the industry to participate, because at the moment, the taxi industry, the drivers or the operators, pretty much only participate at the end of that value chain. So part of the interventions to try and redress that by pretty much coming up with action-orientated interventions. And so we've already done a bit of work in that space, including, for example, the Alexander Automotive Hub, where the taxi industry is investing there as well. So that they don't just participate at the end of this value chain, as I cited. But also we are looking at how finance, relative to what we've seen now, can actually be deployed to try and stimulate manufacturing and productive activities in the township. So finance, yes. At the moment, we are working on a partnership, I think, for a fund. I'm sure soon we'll announce it. I think it has already been announced. We just need to operationalize it a bit in terms of funding so that we are able to actually channel funding where it is required the most in the township. But also we streamline and solve a lot of things, including what you call red tape in terms of funding township enterprises. So Township Economic Bill is one of those critical, sort of keys to unlock some of the things that we want to do in the township. So if you're going to de-risk enterprise in the township, if you're going to enable them to for example, to access certain services, how do? You can't intervene on the finance part without necessarily looking at the regulation part as well, as things stand. So that's where I think the convergence in terms of that comes in. But I think the action plan is also available. I think it's a bit more detailed than what I'm saying at the moment. It also focuses on certain deliverables per sector, for example, how we enable businesses to access certain markets using public procurement, how we basically strike partnerships that will enhance the township economy as well. So those are the, but it is in the context of growing Gauteng together, a Vision 2030, basically.
No, thank you very much. Thanks very much, Masha. I'd just also like to welcome Mpumelelo, who's joined us. Mpumelelo, if you can also please just put your camera on so that our viewers can join a face to the name. And possibly ask you an introductory question, Mpumelelo, in terms of a lot of the times when we look at legal instruments and we look at elements of legislation, especially pertaining to the informal economy, it's often viewed more as a punitive measure more than a protective measure. And maybe as a legal expert from the Gauteng Department of Economic Development, if you can please just outline how the bill is emphasizing for more protection in this particular endeavor and pertaining to the township economic development space economy. Hi, Bum, if you can just unmute. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning, Mpundo. Morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for allowing us the time. Sure, that's a very interesting question you're asking there, and I think perhaps the answer pretty much depends on which side of the spectrum you're on. But for us as the provincial government and DED in particular, when we sat down and decided on the formulation of this particular legislation, for example, the idea was never to put punitive measures, and we already know that a lot of businesses have already, given us a lot of outcry with regard to the red tapes that are surrounding the space we're trying to regulate. Now, even though we regulate using legislation, one of the objectives of this particular legislation is actually to make the cost of doing business in this township easier. It's actually intended at ensuring that we're able to get to a space where people who want to trade and people who want to participate and operate in these townships do not necessarily have the hurdle of facing barriers in terms of legislation. So what the legislation is trying to do, we've looked at what is the regulatory framework that is currently in operation in these townships, and how do we simplify that? How do we make that easier? How do we make it easier for a person to be able, for example, to get their business permits or to be able to get their business licenses without necessarily having to jump hoops and having had to go to like 5 other different state-owned entities in order to be regularized. So in as much as it is a form of regulation, but I think it is a form of regulation that literally simplifies every other regulation there is. That model standard bylaw, I'm not sure if much has already spoken on it, but one of the things that the bill wants to do is to create a model standard bylaw, which will then be adopted by all our municipalities. Because as we know, currently each municipality has their own bylaws, each municipality has a different township scheme. So the introduction of a model standard bylaw will then ensure that in the Gauteng province, as far as doing business is concerned, everybody is on the same page with regard to what bylaws are operating within the space, which will obviously help to create, uniformity in terms of all the municipal districts throughout the Gauteng province. Thank you, Nomfundo. I think I'll answer it that way while I figure out how to turn my camera on. Thanks.
All right, thanks for me. Well articulated as well. And I think it's quite important that we also grasp the draft. In terms of my understanding, in terms of the research work that SACN has also undertaken to fulfill some of the premises for it to be enabling more than anything, because in order for us to unlock the township economy, we need for more enabling environments to transpire. And maybe on this point, Matopane, whilst you were busy also just going through some of the objectives of the bill, are you able to outline for us, especially the point that pertains to the development of taxi ranks into our micro central business districts and to support the taxi economy? Because by and large, I think a lot of the time when we also think about the informal economy, a lot of the times it's juxtaposed as something that is not organized. It's juxtaposed as something that is not contributing to the economy in a formalized manner. And there also is often this notion and tension of a lot of tensions transpiring within that sector. So what has been undertaken, for example, by the Gauteng department in order for them to also highlight, for example, the element of taxi ranks and even the element of backyard rental, because it would be very premature for us to kind of diminish the township economy into just spaza shops, for example. And a lot of the time when that seems to be the notion in terms of the kind of economic enterprise and activity that's transpiring, it really just shows a very limited perspective without us also even looking like at the magnificent point that you'd made earlier on, that I think also it was Wendy who picked up on it, to say that the macro retailers, the supermarkets, them in and of themselves are also entering into this space without actually having a social compact to say how it is that we can also sow back into the township economy and improve the lives of individuals, not just look at them from the basis of just as customers or an element of us gaining profit, but to say how can we sow back the skills, the enterprise, the economic activity. So maybe, Masha, you can just unpack some of those particular objectives of the bill for the interest of the individuals who are part of this discussion.
Sorry, I was some buttons had disappeared. So thanks a lot. I think that is very important question. So in terms of the, obviously, so what we are saying around the taxi, I think it's also flashed on the screen, is that we want to develop taxi ranks into micro central business districts. At the moment, as I mentioned earlier, taxi ranks are mainly just transit points, especially those that are in the township. So part of the interventions was that for us to be able to really have a structured support and intervention in the industry, we need to look at what exists first. So already we have a lot of infrastructure in terms of the taxi ranks in the township. These are facilities that are accessible and so forth. So part of it was that we need to be able to do that. And obviously at the moment as things stands, if we just jump into that space without necessarily looking at what the special SDFs, for example, and many of the regulations that township entails, we may come back and stuck there. So hence, I think there's a that direct correlation between, some streamlining some of the rules and regulations in terms of how we can use space and what we can do where in terms of the township. So that is very important. But also what we are saying is that beyond that, well, as things stand, I mean, if you go to even the taxi ranks that are in your more, let's say your CBDs and so forth, what you'll find, there are a couple of those that will have, that are almost like pseudo mini central, business within that taxi, that transport node. So pretty much that's what we want to, but much more, customized to the township. We know that there are a lot of ideas around how we can turn those into, like, use alternative technology, like either your containerized solutions to basically solve some of the problems in terms of the taxi ranks. However, what we're saying is that here we have an industry that is the mainstay of the township economy. But in terms of the participation in the industry of the main guys there, it's pretty much zero. So part of the intervention obviously is to drive that transformation thing. And already I think since we've started working with the Department of Transport and the industry, there's a lot, we've made a lot of traction in terms of many other things, including, for example, shift towards starting to think around how do we, venture into components manufacturing and so forth. But also part of the interventions around how do we enable the taxi industry to do certain things as a collective, like recycling, as you know, tire recycling as an example. So which is one of the commodities that are used on a day-to-day basis. So those are some of the ideas that, I mean, we in agreement obviously with the taxi industry. But also just to say, I mean, in 2019, before we had the problem with the pandemic, we also had a summit with the industry, the taxi industry summit, where basically the thinking from the industry is that they need to corporatize. So corporatization, so that is quite important. And I think we've seen a lot of them beginning to make strides in that direction as well. So part of the work really is it's also to enhance some of their existing initiatives in the industry as well. So and there are quite exciting initiatives that the industry themselves have undertaken, including, for example, what I mentioned earlier, that around the Alexander Automotive Hub, so we are working with them to actually operationalize that facility as well. So the other part around the township real estate, obviously, if townships, if you look in terms of, issues around density and concentration in terms of where people live, it is quite clear that if you are going to continue building, issues around urban sprawl may become an issue in the near future. So part of the work, I think, and these are initiatives, by the way, especially that were mainly trigged by even the private sector in terms of investment. There are guys that are already investing in the backyard, real estate in the township, and they've made a lot of. I think it's a model that we are supporting as well from infrastructure investment point of view. So as you can imagine, this is also an example of how that type of a project, if you don't streamline regulations, if you don't work around your special provisions around where you can do what and not, that investment may not have materialized. So there's a lot of work that is happening, and I think that is parallel also to the process around the bill in terms of making sure that we pretty much solve some of our regulatory sort of contradictions that we see on a day-to-day basis. So I think, but also in addition, you also need pretty much link this to what you call localization in terms of either job creation, but also in terms of stimulating certain activities around manufacturing in this space. And I think we've seen that in Tshwane now with the program in Tshwane, that though at the moment it's still at the hardcore construction stage, but already in terms of your non-construction services and support services, there's a lot of potential there, and that has been sparked by that investment as well. So these are some of the things that I think we are lining up, and we believe that the bill will enable us to solve some of the constraints that we currently face whenever such initiatives in terms of investment are put on the table, basically. So I think I'll pause here for now, and yeah, thank you.
No, thanks, Masha. We have a question here from Roland. Whilst we're still speaking about the objectives of the bill, he has noted the fact that there's mention of taxi ranks. What about public transportation to connect these informal areas? But I believe he's speaking about, because not everything is informalized, for example, in the township, with the rest of the CBD. So maybe is there some connection pertaining to example for rapid the bus rapid I beg your pardon, the bus rapid transportation system, maybe the linkages with national pertaining to rail. Is there something of that sort maybe that has been developed? So his question is, this is from Roland Postma. I hope I'm saying it correctly. There's mention of taxi ranks. What about public transportation to connect these informal areas with the rest of the CBD?
Yeah, so I'm sure, as you know, especially in Gauteng, so obviously already government is investing a lot in that space, whether through your BRTs, where you're linking, or basically investing in new routes. I mean, Iguru Lane, I think it's one is the metro that has recently, I think last year or so, launched their BRT, which basically links, different townships, especially to your CBDs and so forth. But also in terms of investment in other, I think obviously rail, though Gautrain obviously it will take time, yeah, given the manner in which. So that investment obviously is already there. So the issue here is that so at the moment what you see in terms of taxi ranks, so there isn't really much to do there. For example, somebody was giving this example that while somebody is waiting for a taxi from Zola to wherever, can they just really get into a space where that is safe, where they can pretty much study or do other things in the meantime while they're at these facilities? It's something like so. So when you talk about your integrated or intermodal facilities and public transport system, it has to obviously also be supported by some of those services as well. So yes, but in the main, obviously, the point that we must emphasize is that we also are driving transformation of the sector as well, especially from taxi industry point of view, where in terms of participation in the value chain and so forth. So the objective is quite broader than maybe just connecting spatially or in terms of functionally, your traditional CBDs and your township spaces. Because at the end, what we are looking at is that townships should be able to contribute significantly to job creation figures, so that the impact of transport cost on our pockets of people in a township can actually be diminished a bit, because at the moment that is one of the biggest costs in terms of traveling between townships and CBD, because mainly these opportunities that we don't have in the township exist mostly in your CBDs or the so-called business districts, which are far from townships. So thank you.
No, thank you very much for that, Matsopane. Mpumelelo, there's a question here that also emanates from Sonwabo Marele, who is from Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. So thanks, Sonwabo, and thanks to all the colleagues who have joined in on this discussion. And it pertains to the implementation of this bill, that it's going to be at a municipal space, which has autonomy over its jurisdiction. So how then does the bill plan to ensure that municipalities would apply the particular prescripts? And I think this also kind of links back to an element whereby I would possibly like us to discuss the various intergovernmental relations that will need to transpire, as well as, from my perspective, an all of society approach that needs to be enabled for this bill. And more than anything, not the bill necessarily, but what it premises to do. So the enabling element to enable and to unlock township economic development will need more than just Gauteng province, will need more than municipalities, It will need civil society to come on board. It will need business, both formalized and informal, to come on board. It will need various actors of society, including academia, including government, including your corporate, to also be part and parcel. So maybe if you can just assist us, Mpumelelo, in terms of outlining some of the intergovernmental relations that will pertain to the implementation of this bill. And I think you had touched just briefly on that framework bylaw, just for the interest of this particular question.
Sure, thanks, Nomfundo. I think I love the premise you've given, because I think that pretty much is the gist of what, you know, the response to that question is. But just to add on what you've just said, Nomfundo, I think it's important to obviously note that a legislation of this kind has never really been done in South Africa, in the sense that ordinarily when one passes legislation, there's usually a parent department, you know, that is solely responsible for the implementation of that legislation. But in this particular case, because the very nature of the legislation we're trying to pass is such that it touches across, you know, various spectrums, different governmental levels, but also different departments within governments. So, for example, when we started with the process of developing legislation, one of the things we needed to look at was whether we had the legislative competence to do what we're trying to do. And after that had been established, we then realized that a bill of this nature isn't necessarily reside within the department, does not necessarily reside with the Department of Economic Development, but we needed a buy-in from various other departments provincially to begin with. So we've had to consult with the Department of Lekgotla, we've had to consult with social development, we've had to consult with transport and human settlements and various other provincial departments. Now, over and above that, we also realized that the intention of the bill, and especially as far as the municipalities is concerned, that then steps into the local governance terrain. And as such, which is why when we developed the bylaws, so there's two ways we've cautioned this in the legislation. The first one is that municipalities can either adopt the model standard draft bylaws, which would then, you know, encompass part of this legislation, meaning on once they've done that, they're now in compliance with the bill because they've already adopted. Or secondly, they can either adapt their own bylaws in order to give effect to the principles of what the bill is seeking to achieve. So that either way, whichever option they take, we know that we have covered ground. Now, I always give this example, you know, to say, if you look at the various municipalities we have currently, I think I'd mentioned earlier, because of the various bylaws and the various township schemes, it means you have different business rights and different permits in different districts. Whereas you'd be allowed to operate a certain business in one municipality in a particular city, you might not necessarily be permitted to do the same in another. And that for us was problematic. That for us meant that we needed to come with a way that was going to be a stopgap. We needed to come with a way that would ensure that a person who's wanting to do business in one city and, you know, is not barred from doing so just because they happen to live in a particular township. So as far as local government, we then have that established, you know, relations going. So we've also, as we're engaging in this process of consultations, one of the things we've done, obviously, is to consult as widely as we can. So we've obviously had to consult with the national government, for example, because the Department of Small Business and departments like the DTI would also need to we'd also need to get a buy-in from them. We also need to get comments from them. So the process basically stretches from national to provincial to local government. And as you've correctly put in, this is not just solving an economic issue, but it's solving a human element issue, which means we also need a buy-in from, the academia society, the business society. We need a buy-in from even our communities themselves, because ultimately this bill is intended at making their lives particularly, better in terms of implementing this kind of legislation. And obviously, the legislation is predominantly targeted at townships and township entrepreneurs. So it's very important that we also get a buy-in from them. So in short, just to sum up, to answer that question, I would say that we currently at a stage where we've set and have had to look not only beyond where we're going, but also gave an overview of how we envision this bill being applied in the communities that's going to live. And that has obviously resulted in us being able to engage with national government, being able to engage with local government as well, just so we're able to get to a point where we can implement this. Thanks, Nomfundo.
Excellent. No, thanks, Bumi. I know that an extensive amount of research and work has been undertaken, especially towards the standard framework bylaw, of which as SSCN we were quite integral in terms of getting those right kind of legislative prescripts to assist in the culmination of those particular premises and objectives. Maybe just as a hand and glove situation, and maybe also as a chicken and egg situation in this particular context, for me, there's a question that's emanating here about whether the standard draft bylaw has been drafted as yet, or is the process, and I think you're well endowed to just take us through, is the process to first get this draft bill that looks at the holistic development and premises in terms of how it is that you're trying to enable economic development within townships to transpire, and then get the framework draft bylaw passed. If you can please just clarify that element. I think we had a clarity seeking question here from Roland Hunter.
Thanks, Namfundo. I think you're correct. So what we're trying to do is to first push the gazetting of this particular legislation. We are currently in the process of looking at what we want to put in the draft and what that draft should look like. What we've done in terms of the current legislation as well is we've allowed, I think there's going to be a period of about 6 months within which municipalities will then be allowed to also have a look at what would be the final standard draft bylaw, for them to then look at whether they're able to implement it as is, or they would want to amend their own. So as soon as that process has also been completed, we will then also be able to share that as well.
Excellent. No, thank you so much, Bumi. Matupane, okay, great. I think at some stage your presentation was a bit stuck. I'm not too sure if you're able to just cover all of the premises of the objectives of the bill. I believe there is an element that does speak especially to the retail, and you were speaking about quite an important point there when you're speaking about supermarkets. And often at times the regulation and the stipulations in terms of them having sole propriety when it comes to the development plans and the land use in particular instances does become a huge point of contention, because they are always placed in prime economic nodes, in places of huge traffic, meaning that they are very customer centric in terms of their location, which puts at an obvious disadvantage for the informal traders, for example, and other enterprises that might want to sanction themselves in these particular areas. So the other thing that I think is also quite important is to also note the fact that when it comes, for example, the economies of agglomeration, so bulk purchasing power, there's often also quite a notion to say that when there is this appearance of, for example, supermarkets, that it tends to diminish and distill, for example, the smaller enterprises, also known as your tuck shops, your spaza shops, that also run and also service the township economy during additional extended hours compared to these more formalized retailers. What are the types of maybe interventions that are in place, or that the bill actually proposes pertaining to its objective, especially pertaining to the tensions that arise between the supermarket and larger retailers, and how it is that the bill is wanting to propose for more of an agglomeration of economies. So to kind of ensure that there's more bulk purchasing power and development in terms of the township economies and the businesses and enterprises in that particular space.
Thanks a lot. I think I had a bit of a bad network connection when you started, but I think I got the larger chunk of your latter question in terms of, some of the tensions in the township around displacement of your traditional local supermarkets and so forth. And I think a good example would be Maponya Mall. So for example, when before Maponya Mall was built, there was it was almost already a node. If you look at that space from UJ right up to almost that Shell garage somewhere in Dlamini somewhere in Dlamini. So when Maponya Mall was pretty much built, so what do you then experience? And I think this has been researched a lot also by students independently. A lot of your Pimville based supermarkets pretty much were displaced and closed down. It's only, I think, in the last two years that a different type of retailers now emerge. It's no longer like your traditional supermarkets or grocery stores, but it'll be your car washes, it will be your your drinking sports, your shisanyama, different types of businesses have then mushroomed in the process. So in that case, I suppose, however, the question was that what basically happened to in terms of the original retail stores that were in that main street. So the issue here is that we need to be able so whilst we welcome the bigger investments in terms of the big retailers, whether be it in the malls and some of the facilities, so we need to be able to strike a balance in terms of pretty much creating a situation where these big guys are directly contributing towards the development of certain value chains in the township, as an example. So for example, the point of including sourcing some of the products that is from township-based enterprises. And there are a lot of these. I mean, we've got a larger database of your so-called township products that at the moment, because of, some not necessarily certified and so forth, can't necessarily enter these formal markets. Your acha, your pickled vegetables, and many of these products. I mean, there are many. Every township you go to, you find bricks on the side of the road. So those bricks are not necessarily certified, but they still find their way into the formal market through other means. So what we're saying is that part of the intervention is that while we are encouraging and welcoming investment from the big guys in terms of the township, but we're also saying that let's begin to also purposefully, deliberately almost, strike a balance and be able to advocate for development of certain activities in the value chain that enables local guys to actually supply these goods. So hence, I think if you read this point in conjunction with the Competition Commission report, it makes for an interesting read. Competition report in terms of the grocery market inquiry around how some of these big retailers in the township have led to, unfortunately, but also using uncompetitive practices in terms of displacing these local guys. So those are some of the issues I think that we are saying that needs to be looked at. But so there's some sort of a framework to enable that, so that we are able to actually stimulate actual, real, value chain in terms of production, but also in the process, also developing much needed skills in the township as well. So I think those are some of the issues that we are basically raising here. In terms of, I think obviously the clause will give some light in some of the areas, but yeah, so because and this obviously stems from a clear problem. So whenever you go and you advocate for this partnership, there will always be this assertion that there's no capacity in terms of the township businesses, which is not always the truth. It is in some of the sectors, but not always, not in all sectors, as an example. There's always that assertion that the quality also comes up always, and we've seen a lot of quality obviously, but on the back of that, obviously, we see this proliferation of the big guys. But also in recently, somebody also wrote an interesting article around how the big retailers now are using other means to get into those spaces, like your filling station, your traditional township filling station will just be a filling station without other services now, which is good. I mean, standardizing services across the board. You've got that, and proper bakery there and so forth, and the impact that is having on the township. It's also something interesting that needs to be looked at as well. So these are some of the few things I think, obviously, in terms of this space that we want to. But I think, as I'm saying, it was mainly informed by the outcome of the market inquiry retail report and the recommendations in terms of how we can actually enable township enterprises, and instead of displacing them through clustered partnerships, where, for example, we link them to cluster them so that they are able to actually provide certain services, but also using technology where we then have what you call platforms, through which consolidated platforms through which you can be able to source one product from multiple suppliers as well. And those are the current, I think, programs that we have in place. And yeah, so we hope that with those, but also with the ability for partnerships, especially at this level, we will then be able to develop certain products and value chains that will be might create much needed jobs also in the township, but also stimulate production as well. Yeah. Let me pause here.
Thank you for that, Matupane. And I think whilst we're still on that particular topic, as we're going to sum up the objectives of the bill discussion, and allow you to kind of take us through some of the clauses where I think there's some specific points that require some clarity. Let's maybe just quickly sum up with looking at this issue that still pertains to, for example, that land. And I think this was raised by Sonwabo Marele from Nelson Mandela Bay, who says that land belongs to municipalities, and the approval for the mushrooming of these more supermarkets, these more formalized enterprises in the township, is processed at that local government and municipal level. So, for example, he requests, excuse me, to find out what are the institutional, or what is the institutional will that the draft bill intends to create in order to ensure community contracting and community shareholding is achieved. And I think, Mpumelelo, you can also possibly come in through there. And I think Nick Botha also just wants to second that particular question, and he speaks about land use management as an exclusive competency, as we all have acknowledged, that is held up by the Constitution, and bylaw development is also an exclusive power, but I don't necessarily think framework bylaws, and I think Bumi can come in there. So he's just wanting to get clarity, or I guess maybe this might be a comment. He says that the province has no legal power to enforce their model bylaws on municipalities. The bill should rather aim to assist municipalities bring their bylaws into alignment with the draft rather than using legal force. So I think maybe we should get some clarity there, Bumi, from this particular comment by Nick. that pertain to the province having no legal power to enforce their model bylaws. Let's see there. And then Matopana, if you can please just assist pertaining to the interface rather between local government, them being the authority that actually provides the development planning permission in order for these malls, supermarkets, the formalized enterprises to actually find space within that particular locality where it is that the municipality owns land, because the municipality doesn't necessarily own every element of land that's available, but the permissions, yes, need to be granted by the municipality. And whether the bill actually allows for community contracting and community shareholding to be achieved in this regard. Maybe if you can go first, Matupani, and then we can head over to Mpumelelo to kind of discuss the element pertaining to what is legally permissible by the province as an enabling framework for the bylaw enforcement. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mfundo. I think, yeah, so I don't know, maybe my network it's responding to the weather as well. But I think I did manage to catch a bit of what permission in terms of municipalities around land. So just to say that we also actually own a lot of land, but obviously the larger chunk of the land and properties belongs to municipalities, but also zoning rights. Hence, I think what Mpumi was outlining earlier around the model standard bylaw, that municipal bylaws should be consistent with the object of the bill. So what the things that we want to achieve in terms of the broader objectives of the bill, and where they are not, we may not obviously assist in terms of certain provisions. But also remember that this is not, it's a provincial bill. So there is already a process of engagement. I mean, when we started, I think the first engagement we had was with Saga, for example, and municipal, executives as well. So it is something that obviously at this stage, in terms of the consultation process, it's also an opportunity to also educate the community, but also practitioners around some of the things that we are not aware of around, for example, the rights in terms of constitutional rights of the province, in terms of, for example, legislating or where we can legislate. I mean, in the province, we trailblazed a bit. Obviously, recently you'll remember that we also passed not so long ago the Township, I mean the Schools Act in the province as well. Of course, it was a contested space, but it happened. So there are those provisions, obviously, in terms of what we can do, what we can't do, but hence the issue around intergovernmental, harmonization of some of the activities becomes very critical as well. So I suppose to a certain extent, yes, the issue around rezoning, zoning, and so forth, it's something that will always obviously involve a bit of us, marrying each other with municipalities around what we really want, the developmental mandate and objectives in terms of what we want to achieve. And I think that is quite important. There are a lot of examples where we collectively with certain municipalities we're able to do or initiate certain programs and projects, which shows that when we streamline, certain support interventions or even processes around approvals, whether it be EIAs, we can actually move with speed and unlock a lot of opportunities. So however, if you leave it there as an ad hoc or voluntary kind of, it may not necessarily apply across the board as well. So this process helps us a lot in terms of solving that. I think the issue around community shareholding is quite interesting, and I wish obviously we can develop it much further. But I think in the context, if you look at it in the context of development of malls and so forth, usually there will be a provision there in terms of what the developers need to invest in the community through some sort of compacting or some sort of agreements with the community development, really. However, what we have seen is that it doesn't necessarily translate into that at main, in the main, in terms of most of the projects or programs that are implemented, or these mega malls that are now being implemented in the township. So that is a bit of a problem. I think It's just that I can't recall on top of my head there was also a recommendation as well around how this can be resolved from the beginning of development and so forth, because at the moment, communities don't necessarily have much other than maybe obviously creating those, short-term jobs and so forth. But in terms of the, basically, and it's quite important. So when these guys move in, they look at what you call opportunities in, let's say, construction activities. But beyond that, you find that there's limitation in terms of participation for what township guys can do. So I think I would like to obviously engage a bit around this, the concept around community shareholding in terms of the views around how it can actually be, developed further. But also, further than where it is at the moment, where there will be prescriptions in terms of certain developments. However, there is a lack in terms of following out to ensure that there is that agreement around, empowering the community to actualize. But also, the question was, so when you talk about community shareholding, in what context are you talking about? So is it project by project basis, or sort of what is called now social compacting between government and community? So I'm not sure. I think that is a very, I think at the concept level, it's quite interesting. I think it can be developed further, and I think that's something we can discuss, of course, around what exactly do you mean by community shareholding in the context of the township, so that it's something that we can develop further. But also, just to say, my last point is that we admit that the issue around the social economy in the bill is quite muted. I think there's also one area where we're talking about the care economy. I think that's the one area that we also still need to sort of, tease it out further, so that it's quite much more pronounced in the bill around the provisions of the social economy ideas in the township as well. Thank you. I'll pause here for now.
Thank you very much, Matupane. I think it's quite integral, and we won't make the assumption that everybody knows. The bill is currently under the public commentary and participation process. So I've really noticed some very, very great inputs and insights coming through via the chat, through the Q&A. And so I do want to encourage colleagues to not just leave it at, for example, posing the questions on the chat. We are also joined by Mjaji Research Development, who are the public participation stakeholders who are appointed by Gauteng provincial government to actually do the proper public engagements. And so maybe I just want to bring them in here quickly before we get into the clauses and some of the specifics that pertain to the bill. I know that there's lots of question and clarity that's going to be sought, especially pertaining to the element of designated areas and sectors for South African nationals and registered individuals in this country. So before we get in there, I just want us, and I will definitely note all the questions. Please, colleagues, do keep them coming through. I might even pick on a few colleagues that I know are sitting here silently, because I know of the various elements of work that they've been involved in. That would be very interesting to also get their particular perspective in terms of what can actually enable and enrich this particular process. So if you can come through, please. I think it is Sandra who's coming through from Mjaji Research Consultants to kind of just take us through this public participation process quite quickly, for the interest of those individuals who might not know. There was a question that emanated as well in the chat about the engagement with the taxi industry and whether they've taken up this particular process. And I know, for example, that we currently right now are constituting this meeting online. So what does that also mean? And how does that also iterate for the public participation process? And what are the plans maybe going forward, considering that we do currently have, COVID as something that is quite a restrictor in terms of our normal elements of engagement. So just to welcome you, Sandra, and if you can just give us a brief overview.
Good morning, Nomfundo, and thank you to everyone who's in the room. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to quickly answer the question about the taxi industry separately at the end. But I'd like to start by just like a brief summary of how we have gone about eliciting feedback, information, comments, and also the various platforms that we have used. We've not only used webinars, so we've tried to actually branch out. So I'm just going to take you through that very quickly. We have engaged a number of stakeholders. They range from business chambers, and within those business chambers, we've spoken to the likes of the South African Cities Network, of course. We've spoken to a number of people, the Soweto Access Unit, as well as the Soweto Association. So in terms of business chambers, we've got quite a few people. They are represented across the Vaal, Hammanskraal, Ekurhuleni, Sidibeng, Tembisa, whoever cared to listen or wanted to listen, or who we found were who engaged on the business database. So we have quite a few business chambers that are participating in the bill. They've already we've received quite a few, and I'll talk about the numbers at the end, but we've received quite a few people from the business chamber saying that they are excited about the bill, that they think that the bill is progressive, that the bill is enabling. They might have a few queries there and there, but in the main, they're quite excited. So we've had quite a few people coming through from Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and the Vaal. And that kind of covers our 3 districts in a sense. We've also had the sector, the government sector coming through. We've had comments from the DID, DED, Health, Human Settlements, Department of Home Affairs we're still working with. So there's quite a number of government departments that are also coming through and saying, these are the issues with the bill. This is what they'd like to see affected. This is what they would like to be omitted, and this is what they would like to be added. So as far as the government sector, we've been engaging with everyone, as far as GED, DWS, transport, human settlements, of course, is important, as well as home affairs. So that has also happened. Business forums, we have many. If I were to take everyone through this list, it would be very long, but there are a number of people from Sidibeng, Vaal, again, Soweto, Alex, Midvaal. We've covered quite a few forums, and then obviously Salga and Kochta as the municipal connections, which are so pivotal to making sure that we actually meet the requirements in terms of everything to do with zoning and demarcating spaces, the limitations that many business owners have as far as zoning and sort of demarcating space is concerned. We've spoken also to the traditional healers. The traditional healers are an interesting space because we find that they are also very spread out. They are they've got a few associations within the traditional healer space, so we're engaging all of them. They're also spread out quite far from Hammanskraal, Pretoria side, all the way to the south, you know. And when I say south, I mean deep south. So we've got a number of organizations that are operating. They've also been brought into the fore. As far as the SMME organizations, we've spoken to the SMME Funding Club, which is a huge organization. We had a webinar with them when it was amazing. They are all supporting the bill and they're submitting their comments. Obviously, South African Cities Network as a key partner that was there as part from all the way from the inception of the bill has been a key player. So of course, through you, Sis Nomfundo, we've managed to host at least for now two webinars that we are very grateful for. So that has happened. We've also spoken to the Treasury, the National Treasury, the taxi industry, we've been talking to Santaco. Santaco, we are scheduled to have a meeting with them. It's a face-to-face. They're not going to do a webinar. They want a face-to-face for obvious reasons. So that is being scheduled. And then we also have BASA. BASA's webinar already happened. We have our Stockfell Society, which we are scheduling with NASASA. We did a previous project with NASASA, so we know who to speak to at NASASA. That will be happening. Informal traders, we're going to be doing a face-to-face with them as well. And then just to wrap up, the academic institutions. With the academic institutions, we are deliberately choosing those academic institutions that have a direct interest and investment in entrepreneurship. So for an example, we would be talking to your Wits Business School, your UJ Center of Entrepreneurship, your University of Pretoria, Branton Center for Entrepreneurship. So we've identified in Gauteng, who are the academic institutions that focus on entrepreneurship? And those are the ones that we've been targeting. They have the ball, they're looking through it and engaging with us.
And then maybe, Sandra, just to help out, because we've got a lot of participants on this particular call who might not have been mentioned. For example, from your informal economy basis, we've got WEGO that's joined us. From this, we also have the School of Development Planning. So there are quite a few participants who I still feel would benefit, and especially for those who might not be on the particular radar of the group of Majaji Research Consultants and the greater cohort. Can you please assist us with maybe dropping on the chat contact details or any element of information for the further public engagement? One of the things that we definitely want to ensure as SSCN is that this discourse, this dialogue, the consultation is as vast and as grand as possible, because it does impact a myriad of individuals. We've also got Cocta online. I haven't seen it with
is part of, yes, 100%. So I hear you, Nomfundo, Sis Nomfundo, I hear you 100%. No objections at all. I will drop my email address and Sanali Siwe, and then whoever else feels that they would like to add to that list, 100%. They can just totally give us the contacts, and we will follow through with the documents and whatever else is required. Not a problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sonia. I just wanted to make sure that all our panelists and our participants and attendees are aware that we are trying to, as SSCN, ensure that there's as much reach as possible, especially where our hands and fingers might not get to, but to also acknowledge the various task teams and partnerships that we do have, and especially as part of this particular urban festival, to kind of get the elements of the civic to be part and parcel of the discourse, of the dialogue, and to see the commentaries, to see your perspectives also reflected, especially because this is the consultation phase. So colleagues, Sandra will drop in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, she will drop her contact details in the chat for everybody to just go through. Earlier on, we had also just provided a link. We'll repost the link just for the interest of those colleagues who might have joined in a bit later, of the particular documentation that we are speaking about, so that colleagues are able to view the actual draft bill. We have the gazetted bill that is made available, and as well as all other supporting documentation. So the explanatory memo, as I mentioned, as well as the list of particular economic sectors that the bill is wanting to target, etc., as well as also the stakeholder feedback form, because I really feel that a lot of the discussion points, the questions that have also been posed, will be quite integral in terms of also proposing those from a very formalized and organized and legalistic perspective. So colleagues, we will just redrop the link to where it is that you can download all this information. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sis Nomfundo. We've already dropped it in the chats.
Great.
So people are free to reach us on our email. I will repeat it. It's info@mjaji.co.za. Anyone that needs any clarification is more than welcome to drop us an email on that email address. Alternatively, our telephone numbers can also be supplied. And by all means, through you, Sis Nomfundo, if there are any queries, we are there to handle those.
Great.
But just in closing, yeah, absolutely. Just in closing, academic institutions were covered, as well as legal practitioners, the Black Lawyers Associations, the Legal Practice Council, as well as the Department of Justice was also covered, and National Council of Provinces was covered in terms of getting out all of the information that is required. Home Affairs, definitely, as well as our Gauteng Provincial Legislature, Kokta, and the Taxi Association. I know that the Taxi Association is a hotspot in the sense that they are very much part of and parcel of who we should be talking to about how this bill is going to play itself out. And equally so, the informal traders and hawkers segment. So as far as judges is concerned, we have done our level best to cover range and cover reach. If there are any gaping holes that any of the colleagues in this SACN forum would like to flag, please, it is an open forum. This is the reason why these workshops are happening anyway, is for us to point at who we might have missed intentionally or unintentionally. Let's have a look at those. If anyone is missing a group or segment, let's have a look at it and let's see how do we then mitigate and try to fix that. So from where Judge is sitting, we would like to get correspondence from the colleagues in the room to say, in terms of spread, have we sufficiently covered? And then in terms of depth, we can look at in terms of depth, i.e.
No, thank you, Sandra. I'm so sorry. I need to cut you there. We are running just across time, so I think the sentiments are well noted. Thank you so much. I'm going to take us now, colleagues, to the point where I think we've been seeking just for a bit of clarity pertaining to some of the clauses in the bill. So I'm going to actually first start off by noting here a question that was submitted by Caroline Skinner, my colleague Caroline Skinner. She spoke of, just a second, there's an issue, and if maybe Matopane and Bumelele can just kindly just note these particular points. So she spoke about an issue of immigrants. On the issue of immigrants, there is a key issue that the province needs to clarify. So the bill states, and I believe this is clause 7, 3K, that any person who, or any enterprise which is A, not a citizen or who has no permanent residency status, or B, not wholly owned by a citizen or by a person who has no permanent residency status, in B, not wholly owned by a citizen, there seems to be a bit of a repeat there, Caroline, in the Republic, may be prohibited from owning or operating any of the business activities designated in column 6 of the table in part A of Schedule 1. So it seems that in the gazetted copy that was also shared, the prohibitions are empty. So there's just clarity pertaining to whether this is a mistake. And I believe that Sarah Charlton also just wanted to find out whether this information that is particularly to this column that provides for column 6 of Schedule 1 is left blank or omitted by mistake, or there are actually exclusions or prohibitions that need to be noted there. And then in the same breath, if I can maybe just take us to and I'm not too sure, Mpumi, if I omitted your response to the part that pertained to what legally is the province enabled to do? And this was that question that was raised by Nick, where he stated that the province has no legal power to enforce their model bylaws on municipalities. If you can please just get some directional clarity pertaining to that. And then maybe, Masha, whilst you are addressing this element pertaining to the prohibitions in terms of people who are not South African citizens or registered as permanent residency, Sarah Charlton just mentioned here that on the objective to designate specific businesses and sectors in the township economy to be owned and operated only by local South Africans, could we maybe just recap on the thinking pertaining to this? Is it based on the idea that foreign nationals stifle economic prospects or growth in townships as it implies? And could we maybe talk to an evidence base in this? And I think we'll give our particular comments as part of the research team, maybe towards the end, if that's not covered. So maybe those two apparent questions right now pertaining to a clause in the Township Economies draft bill that seems to be a bit contentious between the legal parameters upon which there are specifications and stipulations for particular economic activity towards the African nationals vis-a-vis those who are foreigners and are having businesses, running businesses, or should possibly want to establish businesses within the township economy. Thanks. Maybe if Bumele, you can go first, pertaining to what's legally permissible for the province to do pertaining to the framework bylaw, and then Matupana, if you can just start easing us into the particular provision pertaining to that clause. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Nomfundo. I think maybe let me address both. With regard to the question on the business activities reserved for South African citizens, if you look at the list, we haven't really, you know, the way it's presented there, it doesn't necessarily say that's the list of business activities that are reserved for South African nationals. So what we were hoping is to receive comments. The list we've provided is basically an exhaustive list of various industries and services, you know, within the economic sector. And what we were hoping is that people would then look at the list and then identify which of those services or which of those industries they would want to be particularly reserved for, you know, South African citizens. So the list as it is right now, it's quite exhaustive. So the whole idea is that people interrogate the list, and then once you've picked or you've found something that you feel should then be reserved as a business activities for South African residents or permanent residents, you then just outline that for us. So I hope that clarifies, because I understand it might be a bit confusing the way it's been published. But to also answer, I think it was Nick Botha's question around the legalities of the legislation. You'd remember, colleagues, that earlier I'd indicated that in terms of the legislative competence, we have Part A of Schedule 4 of our Constitution, which lists the functional areas in which the province has, you know, concurrent legislative competence. So that for us is the first step. That's where we started to do our analysis in terms of the formulation of the bill. So once we had gotten a go-ahead from that particular provisions of the Constitution, we then went on to, if you look at Section 156, subsection 6, as well as subsection 7 of our Constitution, there it says that the province has a constitutional obligation to monitor, support, or even to promote, for example, the development of local government through legislative and other measures. And that for us is an empowering provision for the work that we have been doing. And furthermore, it also ensures that performance by local government and its functions is also given to a province to monitor and establish. And in addition, we also had to look at the legislation that basically operates within the local government sphere. And if you look at the Municipal Systems Act, I think it's 2002, that also provides for that constitutional obligation to the province, to the extent that it empowers the province to actually design and to adopt standard draft bylaws relating to the affairs that are listed in Part B of that schedule that I mentioned earlier. So in terms of the legalities, as indicated earlier, we really had taken the task and the time of ensuring that what we are doing is constitutional and is legal, because there would honestly be no point in even engaging through this process had we not started there. So that was our our beginning point. Thanks, Nomfundo. I think, sorry, if I may request, I don't know if we're gonna go into the close by close now, because I just feel some of the questions, for example, around foreign nationals, are better answered when we've had an oversight of how the bill has been packaged, what the bill is trying to do. Because if we just take it the way we at face value, obviously some sections will jump at you more. But I think if we just go look at the intentions and how the phrases have actually been phrased in the bill, that might also just assist with some of the questions going forward. Thanks, Nomfundo.
No, thanks for that, Bumi. So I'm going to hand over to Matupane Masha to possibly highlight his responses back. And then obviously where necessary, Bumi, you can, and the both of you, can possibly highlight the element whereby, like you're saying, the clauses do give a particular juxtaposition or premise rather, my apologies, pertaining to clarity in terms of what is actually proposed. Thanks, Masha, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks. I think so. Some of the questions I suppose will also be answered as we go, but the issue around the reservation or limitation or privileging, I think we've obviously provided a lot of clarity around what the bill intends to do in terms of reserving and so forth, and yeah, but. So the issue is, it sounds like behind, and it may not necessarily be how this question is framed now, but what we are getting generally across the board is that the fear that though we are not using certain words, we may end up, applying those words. For example, most of the questions around this, the question of foreign nationals or foreign ownership, relates mainly to banning, and there's no banning in a way in terms of I think. What the bill and what Mpumi was saying now. So I suppose that is something that we will just have to really continue to discuss and clarify as we go. Just to jump into the provision, because we've got about 32 or so, 31 provisions, so it's a bit longish. So I wouldn't necessarily, spend a lot of time on each. But just to say that I'm sure you've seen in terms of the first clause is more just the definitions in terms of what we mean. And I think that is very important, obviously, in the context of legislation, the definitions of what the keywords mean and so forth, because that has an impact in terms of, issues around, for example, implementation later when you design, much more detailed programs for interventions and implementation. But that's okay. So the second clause basically relates to the guiding principles which facilitate and promote inclusive economy by doing, among other things, obviously, diversifying ownership patterns to ensure that We don't necessarily, in developing the economy in the township, we don't leave certain sections of the population behind and so forth. So there is that direct participation. And this is already, I think, mirrored by some of the interventions that we are putting in place as well. Yeah, I suppose. But also, so when you streamline some of these regulations, you then facilitate and you simplify entry into certain activities, so that you're able to also achieve some of your transformative objectives and principles as well. I think clause 3 mainly, I suppose, in the main, what the objects of the bill entail. So I won't spend that much time on this. Clause 4 relates also to issues around application of the Act within provincial organs of state and municipalities, responsibilities in terms of support programs, or responsibility in terms of what the different spheres, or these two spheres in the main, are expected to do. So clause 5 provides for non-derogation from conflict with any other laws, and provides that in an event where there's a conflict, and this is quite important, by the way, that in any other law which regulates the development of township or those objects that were cited above, that this act will prevail. And I think that trumping clause, it's interesting, and I think it's something that, though as critical as it is, I haven't really had much discussion around it in terms of our engagements to date. So yeah. Clause 6 provides for designation of township areas by a responsible member after consultation with relevant municipality and provincial legislature. And this is also important because it then directs and determines where you can do what and how, or which townships, or spaces where, in what type of township or category and so forth. So it's also an important clause in terms of the bill, which I'm happy that today, though, we in this platform, we are discussing a lot of the technical stuff around spatial planning and so forth. So we're beginning to really directly input into some of the draft or the proposed provisions of the bill as it relates to how do we, without necessarily using deeper planning language like restitch space, and so that those planning deeper planning terminologies, so that we are able to really intervene where it matters the most as well. Clause 7 provides for reservation of certain business activity for citizens of people with permanent residency status, and I think I've spoken a bit around this. So what we also are not finding, so in other clauses or provisions of the bill, we find that already part of the inputs is that they're beginning to provide or to basically enhance some of the provisions, or propose how we can refine and repackage or reword and stuff. So that basically, but in this one, we're not necessarily we're not getting input in that sense. It's clarity on whether do you want to ban or not, why are you this and why not, instead of saying given the local or international practice, this is how we can approach this area of work, because it's something that I think this engagement, or this public engagement, has also provided a much more structured and formal platform to engage on this issue. I mean, I even saw an article on Sunday, but the article was more confined around immigration and how that impacts townships and so forth. So I suppose this is an important issue that as a country, we definitely need to discuss, and within the confines of the Constitution, and obviously, have a sort of consistent understanding around what we want to achieve here. But yeah, so obviously public engagement is open, so anybody can input in a manner that is they feel it's contributing. But we like the other sections in terms of provision of finances or provision of this and that. We also hope that we'll soon begin to get solution-orientated kind of, or suggestions kind of inputs in this clause as well. So and also we're saying that certain factors that may be taken into consideration here by the members of the executive is issues around affirming Black people, township people, women, people with disabilities, certain activities that enables us to advocate to achieve our production goals and so forth. So creating basically an environment where we're able to create jobs and pull people into meaningful jobs as well. So, but remember also, I think just to sort of conclude on this matter, that so the two national ministers have cited issues around limiting also, for example, participation into certain entry-level jobs. So it is not it's something I think that a country is beginning to discuss, but we seems to not to be, you know. So I hope part of this will be a contribution towards, you know, solidifying some of those inputs as well. Because also, if you look at the Immigration Act in terms of what a foreign investor or a foreign national, for example, needs to have in place for them to invest in the country or to be allowed to do business. The requirements are different from currently the cohort of enterprises that we are sort of discussing in terms of either being ownership of spaza shops or informal traders and so forth. So those are interesting for me, you know, issues that we need to be able to discuss and draw linkages and synergies and see and be able to, you know, inform these discourse as well. Clause 8 provides for licensing of township-based businesses. So in this case, I think obviously in certain, so it also relates now to the list. The list, obviously, so it's not necessarily cast in stone, as Mpumi was saying. So, you know, we still welcome suggestions there in terms of some of the things that we can include on the list. But we know already that the banking guys were talking about the cost of, for example, so if you revise licensing provisions, who absorbs those costs? And these are some of the things I think we're already beginning to discuss, and so that they form part of the support interventions eventually. Clause 9 provides for display of licensing issues. I think, yeah, so this one, I will just skip it. I think it's quite clear. It also provides for a bit of punitive measures where the rules are violated and so forth. Clause 10 provides for licensing authorities to request information. So here, issues around, it sounds easy really, but issues around really affirming and confirming certain details around who you can support in the township here remains a tricky undertaking for government. So I think this is quite important as well for us in terms of being able to access some of this information. Clause 11 around monitoring and let me not spend too much time here. I think colleagues can look at this and still comment on the basis of this. Clause 12 provides for the formulation and developing and planning strategies by other provincial organs of state to support the township economy and responsibilities as well, obviously targeting certain groups in terms of empowerment. Clause 13 provides for provincial organs of state to facilitate financial assistance. So this is quite important. Because as things stand, two critical problems in terms of the 10% in the township that is formalized. They have two gaps in the main. One is access to markets and access to tailor-made finance to support some of their activities in the township. So this is quite important. Obviously, for that space, the space that we are targeting. Clause 14 provides for development infrastructure and other facilities. These obviously will then, circle back to some of the core infrastructure in the township, like taxi nodes, clustered infrastructure that provides for clustered manufacturing, and so forth. Some targeted, obviously, economic infrastructure that enables, for example, issues around, like you currently will have your fab labs, which as an example, where you are able to test and commercialize some of the ideas in the township. So this is quite important. We think that it's critical that the program around economic infrastructure is really accelerated, and we believe that it also allowing, for example, for alternative building technology in terms of certain spaces in the township, whether be it examples around containerized solutions and so forth. But also, I think somebody asked earlier around these motorized kind of shopping things that we are channeling our communities to. So you recall that historically we used to have flea markets, and most of them have disappeared in most townships. So we need to relook at your historical township flea market and how we can repurpose that to suit the modern type of township business as well. But those are the facilities that we believe will enable some of the interventions in the township rather than providing constraints as things stand. Clause 15 provides for provision of industrial and commercial estates to township-based enterprises by organs of state, so that we can at some stage, have proper office parks in the townships where and at the moment I understand it's not that easy. Clause 16 provides for letting of building and premises by organs of state so that they are used for those clustered commercial activities in the township. And obviously capacity building as well as a critical requirement for business. That is provided in clause 17. Clause 18 provides for development of markets and provision of marketing services for township-based enterprises. And I think, obviously, if you link it back to some of the infrastructure provisions like your flea markets and so forth, that becomes an option. I know that there are a lot of some of these facilities that are not necessarily being used in the township. For example, if you go to Dube in Soweto, you realize that the old Patco station is just there. It's some huge steel structure that is currently not being used. Occasionally, some of the entrepreneurs in the township will have what you call open days where they will, sell certain products but those are an example of how we can use those facilities located next to a railway line, a railway station there, to link and create nodes where we can create new markets for some of the township products, basically. So this clause makes provision for promotion of technology and technology acquisition and adaptation in the township. I think in this case, a good example of what we've tried is the issues around the fabrication labs, these technology labs in the township, or innovation hubs or labs in the townships. But we think there has to be, a much more nuanced kind of, repackaging of this area of work. So it's quite important. But also you are able to then link direct financial support and market support to these interventions as well. Clause 20, self-explanatory, provides for the establishment of a fund to support the township enterprises. And I suppose the other clauses just go into details around what the fund can actually be used for in terms of providing loans, loan guarantees, credit schemes, and so forth, so that you are able to really, so at the moment, the current, even when we met with BASA, they were saying, yes, we agree that part of the products that we have are difficult to actually tailor-made it for your typical township enterprise, even if they're formal. Because the moment you get into profiling them, already you have a problem in terms of providing them with an affordable funding. So these are interesting things that we are trying to address, and already so I think also clause 22 speaks to that as well. So colleagues can just look at it in terms of the provisions and provide those inputs. Yes, it's still the same thing in terms of where this can actually be, institutionally be housed, so that we are able to actualize it. So you can see that there's about 5, 6, or 7 clauses that focuses more on funding. How do we fund the township economy? What are the institutional mechanisms that we need to put in place to ensure that we fund the right business at the right time, the right way as well, so that we don't have products that do not necessarily respond to what a township enterprise is and how they are structured as well. I think this is just a continuation. Apologies if I'm moving too fast. I wanted just to try and wrap it up so that we can, because it's a bit longish, but I'm almost done. So yeah, 27 basically empowers the members of the executive to make regulations that prescribing any other matter which may be necessary or expedient for the bill. In this context, obviously, the issues around clause 28, the model standard by law by municipalities. So Bumi, I think, spoke a bit about this earlier. Clause 29 provides for the determinations of guidelines regarding the categories and types of enterprise that can be assisted. I think this is very important, especially if you link it to the sectors and so forth. So we begin then to zoom and narrow to where we believe we can make impact and the how part, so forth. So Clause 30 provides for the amendment of laws mentioned in the Schedule 2 of the bill. And I suppose that is, in the main, I think those are the critical clauses. Clause 31 just talks to the short title and the commencements of the act in terms of the legislative roadmap processes, actually. So yeah, so I suppose, and okay, so in terms of the schedules, so this will be the schedules. Please look at the sectors and make input there. Sectors, subsectors, Part B in terms of designated township areas. Schedule 2 in terms of amendment of laws, and then Schedule 3 in terms of matters relating to the model standard bylaw as per Municipal Systems Act 14.2. So I was correct, yes, it's section 14.2 of the Municipal Systems Act. So I will pause here for now. Hopefully I didn't take too much time, so we can maybe look at some of the comments, but I think in the main we'll appreciate comments and inputs, but also obviously where, for example, the issue around community shareholding or community compacting, I think it's something that we can develop further and tease out some of the critical elements so that we enrich the process as well. So yeah, we are pretty much open. And I will stop here. I think just on the last one, so this is one because we usually have that issue. So it's just a comment in terms of the issue around foreign participation. I think we've already covered this a lot, but just remember that most of also the problem is that because a township business will complain that for them to start a business and do all of that, it's a mission. But one morning they wake up and they find that somebody who they will categorize as a foreign national, for example, find it easy to open business. So in a way, so if we streamline and simplify processes and regulate, we may inadvertently contribute towards managing the situation as well. Because if anybody feels that they have the same chance or they follow the same process in terms of application of licensing and so forth, it may not. The focus may shift from what people will then say may spur some xenophobic sentiments which we don't agree, but yeah. So I will pause here for now and we can discuss. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Masha. I think, like I'd mentioned before, when we opened up this discussion, we are all here because we are nation builders. We are all here because we care about the communities that we serve and the constituencies that we serve. And it's quite important that that becomes the fundamental premise, especially pertaining to this discussion. And so just in the interest of time, I do want to acknowledge the fact that it is now 4 minutes over the scheduled time, but time has flown so quickly because of the great amount of discussion, interaction, and discourse that we had during this particular session. So thank you very much to all the colleagues who joined in this particular session. I do want to just emphasize some integral points. I do believe that Bumelelo and Matupane were answering some of the questions, especially those pertaining to this last particular point of contention. But fundamentally, colleagues, let's all also understand that this is a very iterative process. And I think for us as South African Cities Network, our particular premise in terms of taking this conversation to you and extending the elements of conversation and interaction and discussion is to solicit exactly this. For us to get clarity, where clarity can be sought, for us to also highlight where gaps are. Because we do believe that all our viewers and all the participants who are part of this particular call are seasoned experts. Whether you're from civil society, whether you're from the legal fraternity, whether you are in economic development, your views and your values are well acknowledged. And so we do want to ensure that as much participation and knowledge application is adhered to, particularly in this particular process, because it will definitely inform and impact a variation of individuals pertaining to this particular proposed draft bill. So thank you from my side, especially to the panelists who did join. So thank you so much, Mr. Matupane Masha. Thank you so much, Mpumelelo, as well, for having joined in this particular conversation. And thank you also to all of the colleagues who also joined in this particular call. Just some integral elements of information before we all log out and we carry on with the rest of our day. Please do note that we have provided a link, which is a survey link as SACN, just to solicit some feedback from the team and everybody who joined in. So if you could please just click on that particular link, which is a survey, to also just help us to be able to get as much information and feedback from you as participants on this particular call. I've further also highlighted the community engagement and public participation contact details, because I do believe that as representatives who are on this call, you are also linked with various networks. So let's definitely ensure that as much community engagement and public participation does transpire. So please do contact the Mjadi Research and Development Organization, and I've also just included that particular information within our chat, as well as the link in terms of us being able to download the particular documents, especially the gazetted bill, and then the forms also to also encapsulate the thinking and the information that was discussed today. So much thanks and appreciation to everybody who did join in the call. If you do have any other clarity-seeking questions, please do feel free to email us or contact us as SACN as well. We are more than happy to provide any additional information. Thanks, Lynn. I do note your question, and we'll try to assist you in that regard. But just in the interest of time and for everybody who has joined in here, we would just like to say thank you to everybody who has joined in. And Gideon, just pertaining to an attendance list, we generate a report because of the platform that we are utilizing. So for everybody who's been part of this call, that will be generated. If you need further details pertaining to that, please just contact us. But other than that, thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you so much to everybody who has joined on this call. We definitely appreciate your having participated. And we will also try, as South African Cities Network, to obviously also outline the next steps going forward. So thank you so much, and siyabonga kakhulu for having participated in today's session. We will still keep the information running for just a little bit longer so that colleagues are able to access and take down all the links and the contact information as provided. But other than that, thank you so much, siyabonga kakhulu, and have a lovely rest of your Tuesday afternoon.